Hey there! Having car trouble? Well, no need to fear. MillerTech is here with their LED rechargeable headlamp. Powerful enough to turn the dead of night into a bright sunny day.
Their second-generation model comes with an extra mount, USB-C charging capabilities, and a rechargeable high-capacity battery that'll give you multiple hours of light on just one charge. MillerTech also specializes in batteries and chargers for boats, RVs, even garages and tiny homes. And they're also a proud sponsor of Noah Gragson and the number 4 Front Row Motorsports Mustang. So if you'd like to support them, go to MillerTechEnergy.com and use my code Elly10 at checkout for 10% off your order.
That's code ELLY10 at MillerTechEnergy.com for 10% off.
Wait, I could have used that.
When I was a kid, my dad would take me to the local tractor pulls almost every single weekend. And if you don't know what a tractor pull is, allow me to enlighten you. It's a motorsport comparable to drag racing, only it's done on dirt instead of asphalt, and instead of competing against someone else one lane over, the only objective is to carry a 25,000-pound sled as far down the track as you can. It's pretty cool, and has nothing to do with the topic of this video, but I'll get there. Since my dad was the announcer at these tractor pulls, he'd let me control the music from the crow's nest, or the back of his truck, or wherever we could set up shop. And for a 12-year-old kid, that was exciting. The tractors were neat, the people were interesting, but the best part for me is that I had an excuse to stay up well past my bedtime, because these things went late, sometimes till 1, 2, even 3 o'clock in the morning. These guys were mad lads. They had no qualms about pulling till the sun came up, but on one summer night in 2015, they actually wrapped up relatively early, giving me and my dad just enough time to rush home and catch the end of the NASCAR race happening that very same night. Unlike tractor pulls, NASCAR doesn't usually run this late, and this particular race isn't usually run on a Sunday, but NBC, after almost 10 years away from the sport, was making its triumphant return to NASCAR, and they weren't pulling any punches. They brought in Blake Shelton, bumper cars, and the single greatest musical number to ever grace the airwaves.
Welcome to the place where we speed all day, where we bump and grind in a non-sexual way.
They were doing everything they could to ring in a new renaissance, but pushing the race back to Sunday, as opposed to its usual Saturday slot, would prove to be a mistake. On that Saturday, despite a 2-hour rain delay, they were still able to wrap up the Xfinity Series race just before 11 p.m., and the skies stayed clear for most of Sunday, too. The problem is that Cup was scheduled to run on Sun night, an 8 p.m. start for a 3.5-hour race. Even if all had gone according to plan, they'd be running dangerously close to midnight, and wouldn't you know it, as the 8 o'clock hour rolled up, so too did the rain. It only lasted for a few hours, but it was still enough to push the race back to 11:42 p.m. Starting later than the race in the day before had finished. It was gonna be a really late night, not helped in the slightest by half the field wadding it up just 3 laps in out of 160.
And around they go, the 38 goes sideways. Also involved, the 22 of Logano.
Mr. Krabs, I wanna go to bed!
This didn't need to happen. Pushing the race to Monday was a perfectly viable option, but said Brian France, they wanted to give the fans the race they promised on the day they were promised, and thus attempted to complete all 160 laps on Sunday night. Well, by lap 15, it was already Monday, so I don't know what he was talking about, but nevertheless, the race went on relatively orderly. A few spins here and there, normal for people driving with sleep deprivation, but one guy who clearly had a Red Bull before the race, or more likely an Amp Energy, was the man out front. Of the first 75 laps, Dale Earnhardt Jr. led 40 of them, which isn't surprising. He's nicknamed the Pied Piper of Daytona for a reason. Even before tonight, the only men who have matched his resume and restrictor plates are his teammate and his father, which is where we divert to the dark side of Daytona. This place hasn't always been kind to the Earnhardts. In fact, it seemed to do everything in its power to make sure that Senior would never win its marquee event, the Daytona 500. But try as it might, blow his tire, throw a seagull at him, or send him careening down the backstretch, Dale's indomitable spirit was just too much. And in 1998, Daytona finally conceded.
Checkered flag. Dale Earnhardt finally is a champion of the Daytona 500.
Then, 3 years later, they killed him. Tragic and poetic. Dale and Daytona, two names that could have forever been left entwined in infamy if not for the next generation. Dale Earnhardt Jr. ensured that his father's name would keep taking trips to victory lane. In fact, he won the very next race at Daytona following his father's passing, the same race we're talking about today, albeit 14 years earlier and sponsored by the other big cola brand. From there, he kicked off a campaign of superspeedway dominance, taking his number 8 Budweiser Chevrolet and winning 5 of the next 7 Talladega races, as well as the '04 Daytona 500. Then, as the family team dissolved and he started anew with Hendrick Motorsports, his so-called superspeedway prowess seemed to soften. He still ran well, but had no wins to show for it until 2014. 10 years after he won his first Daytona 500, he won his second.
I can't believe this. This is better than the first one.
Add a dual win and another win in Dega the following year, and we're looking at one of the best plate racers of all time back in his prime. So yeah, it's not surprising to see him pacing the field, and tonight he's in a familiar place in a familiar car. The same car he had won Talladega with, Amelia, as in Amelia Earhart, the first woman to fly a single-seater plane across the Atlantic Ocean. I thought he just got their names confused, but Dale said it was because she had the type of daring, courageous, and determined personality he wanted while driving his car. And with what we've seen so far, it seems to be working.
Paul Menard was talking about just how ridiculous that 88 is. Listen in.
88's ridiculous.
The midsection of the race was a bit of a crapshoot. 2 more big wrecks took out a decent chunk of cars and inspired a pretty blunt reaction from sophomore Kyle Larson. Then, one spin after another kept prolonging a race that was already well into the 1 o'clock hour. Anyone in Daytona Beach trying to sleep that night was sorely out of luck, but if we look closely at some of these wrecks, we'll see a guy who just keeps on missing them. If Austin Dillon had 9 lives, he doesn't anymore, because close call after close call, Daytona just can't seem to nab that number 3 car again. It's a little strange that it's even out here to begin with, because after the death of Dale Earnhardt, his car owner and best friend Richard Childress retired the number, seemingly for good, but in actuality, he was just withholding it for the right driver at the right time. Well, when his grandson felt ready to go cup racing, I guess that was as good a time as any, because at Daytona in 2014, 13 years after it had last been seen, the number 3 car was back on a NASCAR Cup track. Fans were a bit split on the decision, but most people within the sport seemed to support it. Even Dale Jr. himself, who for obvious reasons was a prime candidate to take over his dad's old number, said, "I think it'll be great. It was an iconic number for my father, and it means a lot to his fans." Liked it or not, the number 3 was back, and it gave those fans a glimmer of hope when it qualified first for its first race back. But it wouldn't stay there long, and in its first year back would ultimately underperform its insurmountable expectations. But that's the thing about plate racing. It has a certain randomness about it. Of course, winning any race requires the usual prerequisites, a good handling car and a good handling driver. But the high speeds, close quarters, and inevitability that someone at some point will fuck things up for everyone renders it random and unpredictable. I'm not trying to say that just anyone can win these races, but also that's exactly what I'm saying. And a young up-and-comer driving the fabled number 3 at Daytona, the same track he had won at the day before, seems to have as good a shot as anyone. Provided, of course, he could catch Dale Jr. Yeah, no one was beating Amelia. She was insurmountable. For the few laps that she wasn't up front, Dale was either saving fuel or just making up ground after taking 4 tires to everyone else's 2. He could run a completely different strategy to everybody else, and it didn't mean a thing, as he would take the lead back just shy of the 3/4 mark and not give it up for the rest of the race. 45 straight laps, the final laps, spent at the front in Daytona. As usual, Dale's black Chevrolet was indomitable, unstoppable, though that didn't stop the rest of the field from jockeying amongst themselves. Apparently, Jamie McMurray was bored of all this 3-wide nonsense and tried to take it 4-wide on Sam Hornish Jr., only to send him on a one-way trip through the grass and to the garage. This set up a good old green-white checkered finish, which meant that if anyone was saving anything for the 88, now was the time to use it. Spoiler alert, they didn't. And before they even made it to the backstretch, Junior had a multiple car length lead. Still, in the scramble for positions, the pack formed back into a 3-wide sprawl. Denny Hamlin and Jimmy Johnson tried to gain ground, but with Dale controlling the draft from both lines, it was hopeless. Off the final turn, gunning for the finish line, Junior would cap off a masterclass with yet another inspiring chapter in Dale versus Daytona.
Junior will win at Daytona!
It's now 2:42 in the morning, and in this moment, all Dale can see in his mirror is a big plume of smoke and his father's number 3 flying through the air. It's 12:42 where I'm watching from home, and my poor mother is about to be awoken to the sound of me and my dad yelling. Though, in our defense, how could we not?
And the big one happens behind them!
Oh my God! Holy shit! That looks awful. Oh no. awesome fucking guy, man. You see that shit?
He went over me. I went under him.
The three of Austin Dillon into the catch fence. All the crews getting out to that car.
Austin, you alright? Austin, talk to us.
If he's okay, do not get him out of the belt. Tell him to stay in there. Tell him to stay in there.
Thumbs going up from all the crew members, and the crowd roars. Look at the catch fence on the front straight. Crew members pulling Austin Dillon out. He's walking. What an incredible sight to see Austin Dillon walking away from that 3-car that is demolished.
It was reported that only 13 fans needed examination, 5 required treatment, and just 1 was sent to the hospital only to be released shortly thereafter. And Austin Dillon, the man who in a fraction of a second went from 190 to a dead stop, walked away from the accident with nothing more than a bruised tailbone and a bruised forearm. He even went on to say that the worst part wasn't flying through the air or hitting the catch fence, but the subsequent hit he took from Brad Keselowski after he landed back on Earth, and reportedly said Keselowski, embarrassed and frightened by what had just happened, "I thought I finished the job." But no. Somehow, some way, everybody was okay, though that was no accident. Since Talladega in '87, the first time that a stock car went flying toward the grandstands, NASCAR made an effort to make the cars slower and make their fences bigger and stronger. Then, of course, there was the case of the last man who drove the 3, whose death sparked a revolution of safety, inspiring vast improvements on the cars, tracks, and drivers themselves. And then, as recently as 2013, when a 20-year-old Kyle Larson suffered in a similar style to Dillon, only the fencing wasn't nearly strong enough for the fans standing mere feet from the track. All in all, 28 people were injured, with 7 sent to the hospital, 2 in critical condition, and 1 left with a lifelong traumatic brain injury. It was as haunting a reminder as it was a lesson to NASCAR, one that they took to heart, further reinforcing the fence with cables and pushing the spectators back out of harm's way. 2 changes that had a direct impact on the outcome of this crash. Each and every step, grisly as they might have been, ensured that nobody walked away from this accident hurt, and most importantly of all, everyone walked away. Sure, Daytona once again had its way with the 3-car, but the driver walked away unscathed and unfazed, and Dale Jr., standing in victory lane at almost 3 o'clock in the morning, had reason to celebrate.
That was terrifying to watch. A wreck like that's got such a high potential for someone to get injured, and I'm more thankful that everybody's okay than to be standing here in victory lane, that's for sure.
This would turn out to be Junior's last superspeedway win, solidifying his place as the 3rd winningest plate racer of all time. The crew tried to run it back with the same car the next year, but to quote Martin Truex, Old Amelia was a loose one, and while she soared higher than most, she met an unfitting, unceremonious fate.
Whoa, he's spinning.
He's gone.
Right here. Wait it out.
Dale Earnhardt Jr. for the 2nd time today with Carl Edwards, and Junior's car is aflame.
Oh, man.
I think that'll do Amelia in. I think that's about it for her.
After boasting an incredible average finish of 1.75 the previous year, she was laid to rest in the backwoods of Dale Jr.'s property, the notorious race car graveyard. A similar fate befell the 3-car, if you could even call it that anymore since it was missing an engine and wheels, whatever it was. After NASCAR's R&D department dressed it down and used it to improve upon future designs, it was parked at the Motorsports Museum in Springfield, Missouri's Bass Pro Shops, where, as far as I know, you can still see it today, along with many other racing relics, including souvenirs from Austin Dillon's future wins. Indeed, the Silver Spoon would go on to see some success of his own, as 3 years later, he would stick it to Daytona in the same way that Dale did by winning the Great American Race. He's still in the Cup Series today, boasting a quiet, multi-win career, rife with highs and lows, but even still, when you look up Austin Dillon's name in the search bar, the first result will almost certainly be this: the night that Amelia would fly high and Austin would fly even higher. It's now been 10 years since this happened, at a time when Jeff Gordon was still racing, Chase Elliott was just getting started, and I was still pushing around toy cars for 1,000 views a pop. With each passing day, those memories get a little more hazy, a little harder to recall, but I'll forever remember the night of July 5th, 2015 vividly. The night my dad and I went to a truck pull and came back in time to see the latest finish to a NASCAR race ever, complete with one of the most dominant performances, one of the scariest moments, and one fleeting second where the entire racing world stood absolutely still.
Austin took one heck of a ride. Wow. I've never seen anything like that. It was unbelievable.
Man, I'm so glad Austin Dillon's okay. That's a violent wreck.